Most men think everything that matters happens during the moment itself. They focus on performance, on intensity, on making sure everything goes well while it's happening. And once it's over, they assume the job is done. They relax, they disengage, or they shift their attention to something else without thinking twice about it. But that's where most men get it completely wrong. Because what actually determines how a woman feels about you doesn't happen during the moment. It happens right after. There's a small window, usually around 10 minutes, where everything is different. The energy has changed, the intensity has dropped, and both of you are in a completely different emotional state. And in that window, her mind is not focused on what just happened physically. She's focused on how it made her feel, and more importantly, how you make her feel in the moments that follow. This is the part most men don't understand. They think attraction is built through what they do. But attraction is reinforced through what she feels afterward. That quiet period right after everything settles is where her mind starts forming meaning. It's where she decides if the connection was real, if she felt comfortable, if she felt valued, or if it was just another temporary experience. And the truth is, most men lose her in that moment without even realizing it. They grab their phone, they turn away, they go silent in a way that feels distant instead of calm, or they create awkwardness by not knowing what to do. From their perspective, nothing is wrong. But from her perspective, something shifts because instead of feeling connected, she starts to feel a gap. And once that gap appears, it changes how she remembers the entire experience. What could have felt meaningful suddenly feels empty. What could have built attraction suddenly fades. That's why this matters more than you think, because those 10 minutes are not random. They are the moment where everything either strengthens or weakens. And once you understand how to handle that window correctly, you don't just improve the interaction, you completely change the way she experiences you. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly what to do during those 10 minutes. Not complicated techniques, not anything forced, just simple adjustments that create a completely different emotional response. Because when you get this part right, you don't just become someone she had a moment with. You become someone she thinks about after it's over. And that's where real attraction starts. To understand why these 10 minutes matter so much, you need to understand what's happening beneath the surface. Right after intimacy, the body and mind shift into a completely different state. The intensity drops, the physical energy settles, and the brain moves from stimulation into processing. This is not just emotional, it's biological. During this phase, there are changes in key chemicals like oxytocin and dopamine, and those changes directly affect how someone feels and what they remember from the experience. In simple terms, this is a transition period, and transitions are where impressions are formed. While everything is happening, the focus is on the moment itself. But once it's over, the brain starts asking different questions. Was that meaningful? Do I feel comfortable here? Do I feel connected to this person? These questions are not always conscious, but they shape how the experience is stored in memory. This is where most men lose control of the situation without realizing it. They treat the moment after as unimportant. They assume that if things went well before, everything will naturally carry over. But the opposite is often true. The moment after is where everything gets defined. Think about it this way. If the experience ends in a way that feels disconnected, rushed, or emotionally flat, that's what stands out. Even if everything before was good, the final impression changes how it's remembered. The brain prioritizes how things end, not just how they happened. That's why this window is so important, because this is when her emotional state is more open, her guard is lower, her attention is more inward, and she is more sensitive to how she feels in your presence. That sensitivity can work in your favor or it can work against you. If you create calm, comfort, and a sense of ease, the experience feels complete. It feels grounded. It feels like something real. But if you create distance, confusion, or emotional silence, it feels unfinished. And unfinished moments tend to fade. Another key detail is that this is not about doing something dramatic. You're not trying to impress her. You're not trying to perform. You're simply managing the energy of the moment. Most men make the mistake of either withdrawing too quickly or overcompensating. They either disconnect or they start talking too much, trying to fill the silence in a way that feels unnatural. Both approaches break the flow. What you want instead is balance. You want to stay present without forcing anything. You want to allow the moment to settle naturally without rushing away from it or trying to control it. Because when you understand this phase, you stop treating it like an afterthought. You start treating it like the most important part. And once you do that, everything you do next starts to carry more weight. Now that you understand why this window matters, the next thing you need to see clearly is where most men go wrong. And the truth is, it's not complicated. Most men disconnect too quickly. Right after everything ends, they shift their energy in a way that feels abrupt. They reach for their phone, they turn away, they go quiet in a way that feels distant, or they mentally check out of the moment. From their perspective, it feels normal. The moment is over, so they move on. But from her perspective, that shift feels very different. It feels like something just dropped because a few seconds ago, there was closeness, intensity, and connection. And then suddenly that connection disappears without any transition. That contrast creates a gap. And that gap is what changes how she experiences everything that just happened. Another mistake is going to the opposite extreme. Some men don't disconnect, but instead become overly focused on what she's thinking or feeling. They start asking questions too quickly, trying to get reassurance or validation. Was that good? Are you okay? What are you thinking? That kind of energy creates pressure. It pulls her out of the natural flow of the moment and forces her into analysis instead of feeling. Instead of allowing her to process the experience naturally, it makes her feel like she has to respond or explain something she hasn't even fully processed yet. That also breaks the connection. There's a third mistake that's less obvious, but just as damaging. Awkward silence. Not the kind of silence that feels calm or relaxed, but the kind that feels uncertain. When you don't know what to do, your body language changes. You become slightly tense, slightly unsure. And even if you're not saying anything, that uncertainty is felt, and uncertainty creates discomfort. So whether it's disconnecting too quickly, applying pressure, or creating awkward energy, the result is the same. The moment loses its impact. What should have felt complete now feels slightly off. And that off feeling is what stays with her because people don't always remember details, but they always remember how something made them feel. If the ending feels disconnected, it reshapes the entire experience. This is why understanding what not to do is just as important as knowing what to do, because once you remove these mistakes, everything becomes easier. You don't need to force anything, you don't need to overthink, you just need to stay present in a way that feels natural. And that's where the first real shift happens. Not in what you say, but in how you handle the silence. The first 3 minutes after everything settles are the most important part of the entire window. This is what I call the reset phase, and this is where most men make things awkward without even realizing it. Right after intimacy, there's a natural drop in intensity. The body relaxes, breathing slows down, and the energy in the room shifts. This is not a moment that needs to be filled. It's a moment that needs to be allowed. But most men don't allow it. They either try to talk too quickly or they withdraw completely in a way that feels cold. Both of those reactions break the flow of the moment. What you want instead is calm, natural silence. Not the kind of silence that feels empty or uncomfortable, but the kind that feels settled. The kind where nothing needs to be said because the moment is already complete. This is where presence matters. You don't need to say anything right away. In fact, saying less here creates more impact. When you stay relaxed, when your body language remains open, and when you don't rush to change the situation, it creates a sense of ease. And that ease is what allows her to feel comfortable. Another important detail is your physical presence. You don't pull away immediately. You don't create distance unless it happens naturally. You stay in the moment, allowing the connection to settle instead of breaking it. This doesn't mean you're holding on or forcing closeness. It just means you're not rushing to escape it. That difference is subtle, but it's powerful because when you remain present, it communicates something without words. It tells her that you're comfortable, that you're not in a hurry, and that the moment meant something. Now let's talk about what most men get wrong here. They feel the silence and assume it needs to be fixed. So they start talking. But the problem is, what they say usually doesn't match the energy of the moment. They ask random questions, they make unnecessary comments, or they try to restart conversation too quickly. That creates a disconnect because the emotional state hasn't caught up yet. Another mistake is reaching for distractions. Checking your phone, getting up too quickly, or shifting your attention away sends a clear signal that the moment is over for you. And that signal changes how she feels instantly. Instead of feeling connected, she starts to feel like the moment didn't matter. What you want instead is simplicity. Stay relaxed. Let the moment breathe. Allow a few seconds, even a minute or two, where nothing needs to happen. Because when you handle this phase correctly, something important happens. The experience settles in a positive way. It doesn't feel rushed, it doesn't feel incomplete, it feels real. And once that feeling is established, everything you do next builds on it instead of trying to fix it. Once the silence is handled correctly, the next thing that shapes how she feels is what you do physically in that moment. Not in a dramatic way, in a subtle way. This is what creates what we call physical anchoring. Most men either pull away too quickly or stay in a way that feels stiff and uncertain. They don't realize that small, relaxed movements can completely change how the moment feels. The key here is light, natural contact. Nothing forced, nothing overly intentional, just small, relaxed gestures that feel like a continuation of the moment rather than a new action. For example, a light touch on her arm, her shoulder, or her back. Something simple that shows you're still present without trying to control the interaction. The pressure should be soft, not gripping, not holding too tightly, just enough to maintain a sense of connection. This kind of contact communicates something important. It says you're comfortable, it says you're not in a rush, and it reinforces the feeling that the moment didn't end abruptly. Now, here's where most men make a mistake. They either do too much or nothing at all. Doing too much feels overwhelming. It can come across as clingy or unnecessary, especially when the energy is supposed to be calm. On the other hand, doing nothing creates distance. It removes the sense of connection too quickly and makes the moment feel disconnected. The balance is what matters. Another detail is how relaxed your body is. If your movements feel tense or unsure, it breaks the effect. Even if you're doing the right actions, if your energy feels off, it changes how it's received. That's why this is not about technique. It's about how you feel in the moment. If you're relaxed, your movements will naturally feel relaxed. If you're overthinking, it will show. So the goal here is not to perform, it's to stay present. Another important point is consistency. The way you handle this moment should match the energy that was already there. If everything felt natural before, it should continue to feel natural after. There shouldn't be a sudden shift in how you behave. That's what keeps the interaction smooth. Now let's talk about why this works. Physical contact, when it's done correctly, reinforces emotional memory. It keeps the connection alive just long enough for it to settle in a positive way. It prevents the moment from feeling like it ended too quickly. And when a moment feels complete, it's remembered differently. That's what you're creating here, not something intense, something real. And once that connection is anchored, the next step becomes much easier. Because now when you do speak, your words will land in the right way. Now that the moment is calm and the connection is still there, this is where your words start to matter, but not in the way most men think. This is not the time for long conversations, deep questions, or trying to impress her with what you say. In fact, saying too much here is one of the fastest ways to break the feeling you just created. What you want instead is something simple, micro-validation. These are small, natural statements that reinforce the moment without interrupting it. They don't feel forced, they don't feel exaggerated, and they don't demand a response. They simply add to the experience. For example, something as simple as, "That was nice," said in a calm tone, can have more impact than a long explanation, or a quiet, relaxed acknowledgement of the moment that lets her feel that you enjoyed it without making it a big deal. The key here is subtlety. When your words are simple and genuine, they land more naturally. They don't feel like you're trying to get a reaction, and because of that, They create a stronger emotional response. Now, here's where most men go wrong. They either say nothing at all or they say too much. Saying nothing can sometimes feel distant if your energy doesn't match the silence, but saying too much creates pressure. It forces her to respond. It shifts the moment into conversation mode too quickly, and it breaks the emotional flow. Another mistake is asking questions too soon. Questions like, "What are you thinking?" Or, "Was that good?" Shift the focus away from the experience and into analysis. Instead of feeling the moment, she starts thinking about how to respond. And once she starts thinking, the feeling fades. That's why micro-validation works. It keeps everything in the emotional space instead of moving it into a logical one. Another important detail is your tone. How you say something matters more than what you say. If your tone is calm, relaxed, and natural, your words will feel real. If your tone feels forced or uncertain, even the right words will lose their impact. So keep it simple. Say less. Let the moment carry itself. Because when your words match the energy of the situation, they don't feel like something extra. They feel like part of the experience, and that's what makes them powerful. Now, once this is established, the next step becomes critical because this is where most men either hold on too long or lose the moment entirely. Now we reach the turning point. This is around the 5 to 6 minute mark where the emotional state begins to shift. The initial calm is still there, but the moment is no longer settling. It's transitioning. And this is where most men make a subtle but important mistake. They stay in the same energy for too long. Up to this point, everything has been about calm, presence, and connection. But if you stay in that exact state without adjusting, the moment starts to lose momentum. It becomes stagnant instead of natural. Attraction needs movement. Now we reach the turning point. This is around the 5 to 6 minute mark, where the emotional state begins to shift. The initial calm is still there, but the moment is no longer settling. It's transitioning. And this is where most men make a subtle but important mistake. They stay in the same energy for too long. Up to this point, everything has been about calm, presence, and connection. But if you stay in that exact state without adjusting, the moment starts to lose momentum. It becomes stagnant instead of natural. Attraction needs movement. Now here's the key. You don't rush this. You don't suddenly get up or break the connection abruptly. That would undo everything you've built. The transition should feel smooth, like a natural continuation of what's already happening. Another important detail is emotional tone. You keep the same calm confidence, but you introduce a slight lightness. This could be through a relaxed comment, a small smile, or just a shift in your presence that makes the moment feel less intense and more natural. This is what keeps the interaction balanced. Most men either stay too long or move too quickly. Staying too long creates a sense of dependency or neediness. It makes it feel like you're holding on to the moment instead of allowing it to evolve. On the other hand, moving too quickly creates distance and breaks the connection. The balance is what creates attraction. You stay present, but you don't cling. You allow the moment to change, but you don't force it. Another reason this step matters is because it prepares the next phase. If you handle this transition correctly, the interaction flows naturally into the next stage. There's no awkward break, no sudden shift, just a smooth movement from one state to another, and that's what makes everything feel effortless. Because when something feels effortless, it feels real. Now, this is where things become even more interesting, because once you create this shift, you have the opportunity to do something most men never do, and that's where attraction really starts to build. Now, this is where most men lose control of the moment without realizing it. After the connection, after the calm, after everything feels right, they either stay too available or they pull away in a way that feels disconnected. Both are mistakes. What you want here is something very specific. Confident withdrawal. This does not mean leaving abruptly or acting distant. It means creating a small amount of space in a way that feels natural and controlled. It's a subtle shift that shows you're comfortable in the moment, but not dependent on it. And that difference is what creates attraction. Let's break this down. At this stage, the moment has already been established. She feels the connection, the calm, and the comfort. Now her mind is beginning to transition back to a more aware state. She's no longer just feeling, she's also observing. This is where your behavior starts to stand out. If you stay too attached to the moment, if you hold on to the closeness without allowing any movement, it creates a sense of dependency. It can feel like you're not ready to let go, and that subtly lowers the tension that attraction needs. On the other hand, if you pull away too quickly or too sharply, it feels like a disconnect. It creates a break in the experience and removes the emotional continuity you just built. Confident withdrawal sits in between. You create space, but you do it smoothly. For example, you might be the one to slightly shift away first. You might sit up, stretch, or move your attention to something small without making it a big deal. The key is that it feels natural, not like you're trying to create distance. This signals something important. It shows that you enjoyed the moment, but you're not defined by it. That confidence is what changes how she sees you. Another important detail is emotional tone. You don't suddenly become cold or distant. You maintain a relaxed, positive energy. If anything, you introduce a slight lightness into the interaction. This could be a casual comment, a small joke, or just a natural shift into a more relaxed state. That combination creates contrast. And contrast is what makes the moment stand out because now she experiences both closeness and space in a way that feels balanced. She feels the connection, but she also feels that you're not trying to hold on to it. And that's what creates curiosity. When someone feels both comfort and a small amount of distance, it makes them lean in. It makes them want to stay engaged. It makes them think about the moment even after it's over. That's how attraction builds, not through constant presence, but through controlled presence. And once you understand this, you stop trying to hold on to moments. You start guiding them. Now, this leads into the final stage, because how you handle the ending is what determines whether the moment fades or stays with her. Now we reach the most important part of the entire process, the ending. Because no matter how good everything felt before, the way you finish this moment is what she remembers the most. It's the last emotional impression, and that impression shapes how she thinks about you after everything is over. Most men get this wrong. They either drag the moment out too long or end it in a way that feels awkward. Dragging it out creates a slow drop in energy. What felt natural at first starts to feel forced. The connection begins to fade, and instead of ending on a high, it fades into something forgettable. Ending it too quickly creates the opposite problem. It feels abrupt. The connection disappears too fast, and the moment feels incomplete. What you want instead is a clean, intentional ending. You don't rush it, but you also don't stretch it. You let the moment reach its natural conclusion, and then you guide it forward in a way that feels smooth. This is where a simple shift in energy makes a big difference. Instead of staying in the same emotional tone, you introduce a lighter, more relaxed vibe. You might say something casual, something unrelated to what just happened, something that brings the interaction back into a normal flow. This does two things. First, it removes pressure. Second, it creates contrast. That contrast is what makes the moment stand out. Another important detail is your body language. If you're leaving, don't hesitate. Don't linger at the door. Don't stand there waiting for something else to happen. You move with calm confidence. A simple, genuine acknowledgement of the moment is enough. Something that shows you appreciated it without turning it into a big emotional statement. Then you go. If you're staying, the same principle applies. You don't stay in the same position waiting for the moment to continue. You shift naturally into something else. You sit up, you move around, you change the context slightly without breaking the connection. This signals independence. And independence is what reinforces attraction. Another key detail is what you leave behind emotionally. You want the moment to feel complete, not unfinished. You want it to feel like something that naturally ended at the right time, not something that was cut short or dragged out. Because when something ends at the right moment, it creates a lingering effect. She thinks about it later. She replays it in her mind, not because you forced anything, but because the experience felt balanced and real. That's what creates lasting impact. And now everything comes together. Because when you understand how to handle the beginning, the middle, and the end, you're no longer reacting to the moment, you're shaping it. At this point, you've seen the full picture. But if you only focus on the steps, you'll miss what actually makes this work. Because this was never just about what to do in those 10 minutes. It's about how you make her feel in those 10 minutes. Most men believe attraction is built through big moments. They think it comes from what happens during the peak, from intensity, from effort. But what actually stays with her is not the peak. It's the after. It's the feeling she sits with once everything settles. That's what her mind holds on to. If she feels calm, comfortable, and connected, she remembers you differently. You become someone who feels easy to be around, someone she associates with a positive emotional state. And that association is what brings her back. But if she feels confusion, distance, or pressure even slightly, that's what stays instead. And that's why small details matter so much, because they shape the emotional outcome. Another important thing to understand is that this is not about being perfect. You don't need to execute every step exactly the same way every time. In fact, trying too hard usually creates the opposite effect. What matters is that you understand the principles behind it. Stay present. Don't rush. Don't overcompensate. Allow the moment to move naturally. When you do that, everything feels different. You stop trying to control the interaction. You start guiding it. And that's what creates a sense of ease that most men never achieve. Now, here's the bigger picture. Attraction is not about constant intensity. It's about emotional consistency. When a woman consistently feels good around you, when she consistently leaves interactions with a positive emotional impression, she starts to associate you with that feeling. And once that association is built, it becomes automatic. She thinks about you without trying. She wants to see you again without needing a reason. Not because of something you said, but because of how she felt when she was with you. That's the difference. You're no longer chasing attention. You're creating an experience. And experiences are what people remember. So the next time you're in that moment, don't treat it like it's over. Treat it like it's the most important part, because what you do after determines what she feels next. And what she feels next determines whether she comes back. Now, I want you to do something simple. The next time you're in that situation, apply just one of these principles. Don't try to do everything at once. Just focus on one and observe the difference. You'll notice it, and once you notice it, you won't go back to doing things the old way. Drop a comment and tell me which part stood out to you the most. I read them and I respond to as many as I can. And if this gave you a new way to understand attraction, make sure you subscribe, because in the next video, I'm going to show you something that connects directly to this. How to know exactly when she wants you to get closer without her saying a word. And that's the moment most men